The story that I was trying to get round to last night, net migration. There's been a report out now that says it's unlikely to drop below what we saw pre-Brexit anyway, any time soon. Now, this is not really surprising, is it? Because at the moment we're having a lot of people enter the country from a variety of different places, different war zones and all the rest of it. We seem to be having mass population shift now on a scale that is enormous, and I do not see that getting any better anytime soon. So some people are asking, have we lost control of immigration? Did we ever have it in the first place? Do we need to put a cap on migration? Your thoughts?
Oh, well, I suppose in terms of the numbers from this study and in terms of the net migration we're currently seeing, which is at record levels, right, that is not principally people coming here irregularly. That's principally people coming here because we decided we want them to come. So,
I didn't say it was irregular. Talking about net migration.
Well, you were talking about people who we can't control, and you're saying they're coming from lots of different war zones. So the vast majority of people coming over here that will make up these numbers are people who are coming here to study, coming here to work. Some will be family reunion, but the vast majority coming to study and coming to work. So we do have control over that. We've decided that for our universities, it helps to have lots of international students. We've decided that for our businesses, it helps to have a fair few international workers. So if we wanted, we could reduce that. Obviously, when we were within the European Union, there was freedom of movement. We did have less control. Now we do have control, but a decision is being made by politicians and, you know, in conversation with businesses and universities to say, actually, this is quite a good thing. And so that's why numbers are remaining quite high.
Do you think there should be a cap on net migration figures?
No.
No? Just however many? And Jacqueline, your thoughts?
Well, the question is, will we ever be able to control it? And I have to say, not while we've got barbaric extreme terror groups who are allowed free rein across the Middle East, Asia and Africa. There are hostile states as well. These people are encouraged. They cause chaos, disruption and fear. What we have tended to do, in my view, is appease far too often many of these countries. So we've spent billions in aid over the decades. If you think from sort of World War II, most of the money never ever goes to these very poor civilians that are living in these countries. The money, as we've seen now with Hamas, Hezbollah, all of them, the money is actually spent on arms. It widens from arms. It's in the drugs trade. They'll be involved in people trafficking. And I say this because I was brought up with in a sectarian city, which was Liverpool, and the situation then evolved with obviously the way the IRA was behaving. So in my first job, when I started with British Airways all those years ago, we were up against hijacking from terrorist organisations, the PLO. And, of course, the IRA was also a terrorist organisation. And I think that, of course, you want to try and come to some sort of resolutions with these things. But until leaders in major governments across the world stop thinking that aid is the answer when it's not, and start taking to task these governments who allow their civilians to virtually die of starvation while they're spending the money on many, many other things, we will not get any sort of solution or resolution to this. I am an optimist. I'm always an optimist. But I am sick and tired of this pussyfooting around, making excuses of why, for some historical reason, some particular group or some particular country has got some grudge. And while they're allowed and appeased to behave in the manner that they're doing, we are not going to resolve this because it will exacerbate. We've seen what's happened now over the years with illegal immigration. It's so hard to control. If we do try to put measures in place in this country, for example, we then find, obviously, there's a lot of politicians who don't want to. They want open borders and all of this. But you see, I say this,
You're
Michelle...
You're the governing party. This is what I can't get my head around. You've been the governing party for over a decade.
I don't disagree. But equally, the governing party, you've got to have cross-party solutions to these sorts of problems.
Why? You've got a majority.
I don't disagree with that either. We've had a majority, actually, since about 2015, because initially we were obviously in coalition with the Liberal Democrats. And this is exacerbated since the Merkel decision. and it started to exacerbate, I think, with more groups. But one thing I have said, and I have said all along with this, and particularly on the illegality of all of this, is the primary purpose of a nation state is to protect its citizens. We have people coming in this country and going into other countries throughout Europe. They have no idea who they are. They're coming across borders, and our own governments have got to really clamp down on what's actually going on.
Do you agree with any of that, Michael?
Well, again, I think it's important to sort of separate two different things here. So if we're talking about numbers, then the issue really isn't asylum seekers or people crossing the channel. With numbers, we're talking about students. I think there were 350,000 people who came as students last year, around 250,000 workers. Then in terms of asylum seekers, that was about 80,000, about 45,000 people crossed the channel. So if you're talking about net migration in numbers, then the issue, I mean, I don't think it's an issue. I think it's good for our universities. I think it's fairly good for our economy. And that's people who are coming here completely legally.
Right.
What is what, sorry?
When you're saying it's good, you're talking about 1 minute, we're talking about asylum seekers, and we're talking about channel crossings, and you're saying that's good for the economy. I'm asking, what do you think that people getting in those boats and crossing the channel, is that good for the economy?
Well, so there's different forms of migration which we sort of accept for different reasons. So with students and workers, they are what we'd normally call economic migrants, and everyone agrees that's pretty good for the economy. And when it comes to asylum seekers, obviously the reason we're accepting them is because of international obligations. Now, again, economists tend to say that in the long run, asylum seekers will improve an economy. In the short run, it's somewhat ambiguous. I suppose one other point I wanted to respond to is this idea about appeasement. Because I'm not really sure what that would mean in practice. So if you look at, if we talk about refugees now instead of sort of economic migration, the places where most people come from are places where we have quite actively intervened. So we didn't appease the Taliban. We didn't appease Saddam Hussein. We went in and invaded those countries. And it's then those countries which send a lot of, well, they don't send them because people leave by choice, but people leave as asylum seekers to come to the UK. So I'm not sure what this more sort of proactive foreign policy of anti-appeasement would look like and why that would reduce people who are fleeing their homes.
Well, I don't think you need an O-level or an A-level, frankly. I mean, it's quite obvious that what people do is try to come to resolutions. I have no problem with that. We came to a resolution pretty well with Northern Ireland, and it took decades. So I'm not saying that there's never an answer. But what we know is the groups that we're talking about now, the disruption where it is right now is across the globe. It's across the globe. We know what Iran's doing in terms of funding. We know what's going on. We know that there are monies going into these countries which are actually for the citizens of these countries. It never goes anywhere near them. But we know it happens. And so there is an appeasement in that. I'm using it in that context. And all as I am absolutely saying, the difficulty we also have, and we have it in this country, is about integration. And we've always had a relatively slow process of people coming in and out because we want people to integrate well and we want people to get on. We are now finding there are issues in this country where, you know, the British culture seems to be an issue. Well, the British culture is not an issue. If I go and live in another country, and I've lived in several, I accept that their culture will be different perhaps than mine. I have to accept it, and then I will work alongside and within that. But we are also in a position in this country now, and there are people and there are factions in this country, and they do not appear to even like the country that they are living in. And this is not acceptable, and it just doesn't, it's just not the way forward to how we look positively at how the country is going to grow, how we're going to deal with migration and immigration in the years to come. We need to have some hard thinking about what we're actually going to do and look at the citizens of the United Kingdom, the citizens here already, how we're going to deal with all of this.
Do you want to respond to that?
Well, I suppose, again, on this appeasement point, so you sort of talked about Iran, and I think with Iran, that's, again, another country that we have sanctions on where lots of people are leaving. So people tend to leave countries when there's instability or when there's sort of a crippling economic crisis. And I think Britain's foreign policy has been very mistaken when it comes to that, because we often have stoked instability.
Well, let's not go back on having a row about Britain's foreign policy. We can't turn the clock back. We have got to look at where we are now.
We
know there are problems.
Like you were talking about foreign policy.
No, but of course we do. We know that, you know, we've done history, a lot of us. You know, we'll know what's happened over the last 200 years or 1,000 years. We know that. We can't turn the clock back. We've got to look at where we are now. We can see where the issues are. How are we actually going to deal with it and start to get some resolution? And as I said, and I go back to that point, unless a lot of these governments around the world start taking responsibility for their own citizens and stop leaving other countries to try and pick up the mess because they're spending aid, they're doing all sorts of things. I've seen it in Africa. I was there many, many times. Many times.
Let me ask
that
you-
people never see any benefit from any help that they ever get.
One of my viewers, Jason's just got in touch saying, you've been talking about, the question was about legal immigration. Jackie, he says, Jackie's not answered the question about legal immigration. Would you support a cap, for example, on net migration figures?
I think where you have a difficulty, I'm not opposed to caps, but the difficulty you've got to have with when you put a cap on, what's the cap actually mean? Does it mean the number of people with skills that are coming to the country? Does it mean the number? Did you put the number of people in age groups in terms of those that want to come into the country? Because you're looking at the demand and supply of your economy, and I appreciate that. I think that's a fair point for him to comment on. But I think caps, governments then, they change and the government, they say, we'll put a cap on this and we'll put a whatever on that. And inevitably it shifts. And I think it's just really taking a realistic, hard look at, who should come in, how it should work, and what the real demand is for the economy and the SMEs and the whole supply chain. But also, we've got enough universities, we've got enough people actually out there we need to be training ourselves.